Welcome to this Mastery Empowerment course from New Earth One Network. This is designed exclusively for your higher self connection and embodiment. Welcome to this Mastery Empowerment course. This is an introduction to our next series of transmissions with Jean Eng and the Arcturians. This is the Arcturian Omni frequencies, and we are here to connect with Source on an even deeper level. Hi, Jean, welcome.
Hi, Lauren. Hi, everyone. Really looking forward to these new sets of frequencies that are also part of the unpacking of the next level in the Arcturian healing method, which is the Arcturian healing method level 12. And we started to work with some of those frequencies with the Arcturian high frequency light frequencies in the last empowerment class. And now we're unpacking the Arcturian Omni frequencies.
Very exciting. I think every time we come together in these transmissions, there's great transformation. And we continue to feel the unpacking of the transmissions, even like I'm still feeling them even afterwards. And it's always so elevating. So these Omni transmissions, they are here to really put us into resonance with our true self as divine beings. And we'll go over these. Can you go over the Arcturian Omni frequencies, the three different ones that we'll be covering?
Yeah, maybe I'll mention some of the inspiration from these frequencies. And these are like subtle intuitions, impressions that we all get in our creative process. And that might help in understanding these frequencies. The first one was we've been having a short discussion throughout some of the classes on a process called the rainbow body. We might have mentioned it when we did the Arcturian divine forms. The rainbow body is actually a term actually from the Tibetan yogic system, although it probably has occurred in various other spiritual traditions. And basically what happens is a living master who's basically divinized, you could say, or created a lot of divine light in their consciousness, and particularly their five elements. When they know they're ready to pass from their physical body, they'll sort of go into a seclusion, not having anyone around. And when sort of their people who are associated with them come to see them after they've been in this room, they actually just are hair and nails. That's the full rainbow body. So their bodies, basically, their physical body is transformed completely into light. Or in some, like what they call partial rainbow body, the body will be like a shrunk, like it will kind of look like a 1 foot or like a small doll or something. And these have been reported actually in modern times. So it's not just something kind of in the way past. And they believe, or at least there's a hypothesis from a recent student or writer in both the Catholic tradition. He's a father, priest, as well as also was initiated into the Tibetan tradition, who investigated a very recent rainbow body yogi. But he believes that perhaps the resurrection of Christ was a form of the rainbow body. And what happens is these masters are beings who were, of course, were human, who are in the rainbow body state. What they become is then available in their consciousness to all beings. They're sort of what we're talking about here, that they're omnipresent. And you could say that's also omniscient. So all omnipresent would be all present, omniscient would be all kind of thinking, and then omnipotent is all kind of powerful. We tend to use those words, like if you have been in the Christian tradition, they usually associate that with God. Here, we're sort of associating with the divinity. Of course, if you want to use the term God or all, sort of our divine self. So here are examples of beings who are able to perhaps attain that state in a very direct way. And then supposedly these masters, they're no longer really associated with any body or personality. They're then present for all beings who connect with them. And they can show up actually in many forms. They could reincarnate, so they could show up back into a human form, or they could be even in inanimate forms, anything that could be helpful to beings. So that was one of the inspirations for these frequencies. The other one was this intuition, and I think I mentioned it actually in our recent empowerment classes, of this sense of what would healing be like if you didn't heal through a body, like a physical body, or even an energy body. And I think this intuition, and maybe it was coming from my guides or higher beings, or it just could have been coming from my own higher self, is the sense that we already have that in us. We just tend to associate ourselves with a particular form, sometimes very strongly. Like we tend to think maybe we're just this local physical body. But if we didn't, and so like when we think of healing, even energy healing, it tends to be like there's a transfer of energy from my energy field, which maybe looks like my hand, over to like a person's chakra. But if we didn't have that form, if we were just pure consciousness, what would the healing look like? And I think it was trying to, again, go into resonance with these qualities of ourself that would be more like omnipresence. I think that people or beings who we consider ascended masters, who might not be in a physical body anymore, they're probably, that's the way they do their healing or their effect on humanity.
Okay, that's powerful. So we can connect in with these masters who are here to assist us. And we're going to use this in our transmissions in how we show up in the world. So let's go over the 3 sessions.
Yeah. And I think what really this is talking about is states of consciousness. And you could say it's like gross to subtle states of consciousness. And these frequencies help us to access probably our most subtle states of consciousness, which have these qualities. And then from that state of consciousness, they can manifest back into more grosser, or we might call it denser, states of consciousness, and also denser dimensions. So like when we talk about the dream state of consciousness, that's a little bit more subtle than our waking state right now. And then there's the deep sleep where there's no form. And if you become aware in those states, like the deep sleep state, you're becoming much more subtle in your state of consciousness. It's like a ground state of consciousness where you start to have access to this omniscience, omnipresence, and omnipotence qualities. And then you can bring those back into the world and help those kind of manifest through what we might call limited forms. The problem with discussion of something like this is if a person is thinking we're referring to omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence to their limited form. So if a person thinks I'm omnipotent, the I they're referring to, if they think it's this body and this personality, then of course that becomes a problem. That becomes like a ego inflation problem. So we're really referring to the deepest state of consciousness, which doesn't actually have any form yet. Anyways, those are a little bit like a philosophical idea, but I think it's the underpinning for these sessions, which of course we'll go over a little bit more during the class. But yeah, so just to describe the first, each session will be access to or will be exposed to these frequencies, which is really, I think, going into resonance first with that deepest part of ourself, our consciousness, then with those guides who have that awareness, and those might be ascended masters who have a particular connection with. And then I do believe the Arcturians do have that state of consciousness, or they maybe it wouldn't have been inspired perhaps through them. So then if people have a close resonance with the Arcturians, I think they're also an example of beings who have attained that state. And then the first one, so is omnipresence. And so this is more our kind of capacity to be how we show up, how our presence is. And we may think of it like when we interact with someone, we still tend to still think of them as a body. It's hard not to identify someone because we probably met them through their physical body. But after a while and after working spiritually, we sort of can just even feel them, even if they're not physically present. And I think as we're working more and more online in Zoom, we're actually not like we've never met physically, but we sort of know each other through our presence, which is but through this slight reflection in the physical that was really more just a video. So I think more and more, because of technology, it actually helps us to access more of a person's presence. And then after a while, we don't even need like an image or a picture or a video. We can even just what we might call telepathically connect to someone's presence. And so I think that's really what the first session is coming into resonance with.
Yeah, very cool. And it reminds me of why light workers are coming together all around the world through this technology, and how we were spread around the world with this mission, because we can connect in this way. And it really, the word unity consciousness comes about with this, as we are striving for unity consciousness, evolving towards unity consciousness. Omnipresence is it. We are everywhere all at once. That's very quantum, isn't it? Very multidimensional.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, more and more we're having, first we understand the concept, but more and more we're having those direct experiences. And I think like precognition and maybe just the fact that we do have like, for example, texting. So we can sometimes feel a person's already thoughts coming in, and then we get a text. And so it kind of is it's a fun way, but it is a way to kind of have a reinforcement in the physical to what we're experiencing in these subtle planes of like unity consciousness, like a confirmation.
Yes, a confirmation. And so the Arcturian omnipresence healing frequency is how we show up in the world, our frequency and our vibration. Will this help us be more stable in the divine connection?
Yeah, ultimately, I think all three of these, are just aspects of the divine and going more into resonance with that. So the example would be, we started from base one. Let's say someone found this idea, somehow somewhere inside they felt connected to these ideas, but they didn't really understand what we're talking about, because that's possible if like you still just think of yourself as, Jinang in this physical body. How could I be omnipresent? Like you're where you are, I'm here. How could I be around you? It's because they keep associating themselves with their physical body. Not a lot of people probably here listening to this would be maybe in this camp, although there possibly is someone, because a lot of people have done energy healing which has already expanded, who they think they are. And maybe they've done distance healing. So they know they can affect someone from a distance. They already have direct experience that they're not really localized to only their physical body. But so back to my example, somewhere intuitively, though, they know what we're talking about. They have some aspect of that because in their non-waking state, they have experienced that, like in the dream state or in very deep states of consciousness. We just, in this example, we haven't remembered those things consciously. They're like at a superconscious or subconscious level. So that's kind of what these frequencies do. So everyone can be on a scale. It's not like a either or. It's sort of like a sliding scale. Like, yes, I understand this omnipresence. I've had some experience of that where, I did energy healing on someone by a distance and they said they got better. So even though you might still think of yourself as like here, like I'm here in California and they were in Arizona, somehow like I had a direct experience of actually being more omnipresent because I was able to affect someone beyond space-time. So they're kind of not way over here where they're just identifying with their physical body, but they've had enough experiences that they're somewhere in the middle. And then people who are like those masters who I was referring to, they may have full experiences of being completely omnipresent. They really embody and have experienced that. And maybe they're no longer in a body because sometimes, you get to that extreme and you've let go of the physical body. So you're just now pure consciousness. And so that might be some of these various ascended masters who we connect to, but they're no longer in any particular form body. There's the sliding scale, and these frequencies help us to move forward wherever we are on that scale.
Okay. As you're talking there, I'm reminded of our dream space and how, people in this group have dreams of the people in the group, even though we've never met in person. And so that is another indication of this omnipresence. And I also am thinking of the books, the life and teachings of the masters of the Far East.
Yeah.
They're very omnipresent. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then it brings up bilocation and all of this, changes in the physical form from it. Okay, fascinating. And I know that when we do our webinar, we can talk even deeper on this subject. So the second session is Omnipotence, the Arcturian Omnipotence healing frequency and how we function in the world. Tell us about this one.
Yeah, I think this will be exciting and fun for people. I think this is when we remember just how powerful we are. And again, the less we localize it to any particular form, although we are showing up in a form that's helpful. So we're showing up maybe in a physical body now because then we can talk to people. Whereas maybe these masters who have ascended, at that point, they just transmit maybe by thought. And then they can transmit to millions or what we consider millions or billions of beings simultaneously. But they still may take on a form body because it still could be very helpful, like an incarnation. So they could write a book or something, or they can show up on Zoom or something, because not everyone can be reached by just a pure mental transfer consciousness. They need the language and a form that they can kind of understand. So like a physical body is very helpful to be a transmitter of that. And so we're all of that. We all have that choice, and we're sort of remembering all those capacities of how we can sort of, in a sense, be all powerful, meaning we can show up in many different ways. And I think that's what's so exciting or exhilarating is when we see ourselves using our different forms in a creative way, showing up in a certain ways. And those are just reflections of the omnipotence. So the omnipotence is really a state of potential. And then however you show up, maybe it's in the emotional field, maybe it's in the mental field, maybe it's in the physical field, is really a reflection of that omnipotence or that all-powerfulness.
Okay. Again, it makes us think of time travel in talking to, let's say, for example, maybe in a relationship, if you're having an issue with someone, we can time travel and work through that issue by being omnipotent, right? With love and compassion, and impress upon that relationship the energy and maybe communication in that energy, in that relationship, so that when we step into that real-time space in that relationship, it's taken care of. The way is paved and it goes a lot smoother. That's what we're talking about here in a way.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think these frequencies will help us from a very, like you said, practical level in showing up in a way that even the miracle of us showing up in the physical, because we've taken it so for granted, we may not have, because it's in the superconscious, we may not have remembered the time when we were just pure spirit. And then to actually show up in a physical incarnation, and if you kind of just spend a little time thinking of it, which people probably have, like you had to get into that fetus, which were just two, one cell. And then, that was all that was us at one point. We were just one cell. If you identified that with your form, of course, we were that vast soul consciousness, but just showing up like this now is a reflection of that omnipotence. And I think we know that when we kind of spend a little time, but we're sometimes always just in this body so much that we forget that. But I'll just give an example of like what you said. Like there's some Tibetan masters that are known that their reincarnation actually is into multiple people at once. So like when they go to look for the reincarnation, they actually will find like 3 kids. I think that was part of the Keanu Reeves movie. Maybe it was called Little Buddha, where they were looking for the reincarnation of the master. And at the very end, they actually find like 3 kids who are actually all from the same soul, and so they're that soul, and this is all abilities that we could have. That's what these frequencies are trying to remind us, that if you thought like, how could I be the best benefit for my next incarnation, you could show up in 3 bodies, because your soul is omnipotent. It's a consciousness that has all powerfulness. So if you thought that could help, you could do that. And so that would just be a reflection of one possibility of that.
Yes. And so spiritual teachers, Sai Baba is another case where Teal Swan, the spiritual teacher Teal Swan, is an aspect of Sai Baba. And so he reincarnated, his energy, his aspect reincarnated. And isn't it interesting that our soul can be in 12 different beings as well? We hear that from the spiritual teachings, that we are in other bodies. And then there's doppelgangers, this phenomenon of the doppelganger. Could this be kind of what we're talking about as well, where maybe our soul is getting out in the world in more than just one vessel?
Yeah, exactly. And we actually may have other emanations right now. We just, we haven't remembered them, or haven't, usually don't meet, but we haven't met them because we're all doing that other aspect of your soul is actually doing its thing. So you kind of stay a little bit almost like magnets. So you try to stay a little bit, don't cross over. But it could be happening now. And I think what these frequencies and what our conversation is saying is we're slowly remembering these abilities in us, and maybe even they're functioning right now. That's occurring. And sometimes people will say like, oh yeah, I dreamed that you helped me out or something. And but your personality doesn't really have that awareness. But your soul consciousness, this very maybe called a super conscious aspect, which has this omnipotent quality, that was emanating from there.
Yeah, okay, very cool. And so these frequencies will download to us, and we will assimilate them in our own lives and become more potent and palpable in our lives. as we build with these. So the next one is the Arcturian Omniscience healing frequency and our all pervasive thoughts in the world. What's this one about?
Yes, this is our divine consciousness. You could say the omnipotence is maybe our divine form, how we show up. And then the omnipresence is like our vibration. Sometimes this may be associated with body, speech, and mind. So this is the omniscience is more the mind aspect. The omnipotence is more kind of the body, meaning any form. It could be like the immortal body. It could be an astral form. And then the omnipresence is a little bit like the speech, like the vibration of who we are in this kind of highest divine potential. But back to the omniscience, this would be like how we might show up, like as how our consciousness might show up from this omniscience state into some kind of form that might be helpful. And I put that example in the write-up, which maybe we've had where we might have been the recipient of this beneficence, or we actually may have been the one who benefits someone, is that, someone's in a very down state. And a lot of times this is how the ascended masters, I think, or angelic beings, or even us in our omniscient state, help people, is that just by like these positive thoughts or prayers that we're not really directing to anyone, it's just any being that could be helpful, it will reach them at the appropriate time. And then usually what happens is someone's very down and then somehow they get out of it. It's like a slight instant where they just kind of turn the corner, and it wasn't anything that actually happened. It was all within their consciousness. Sometimes they're not aware of how that got to them. They may think it just came from themselves, but a lot of times it could be these beings, it could be us in our omniscient state, or just in our pure motivation to be of service that inspired them or gave them that little boost, but it was on a mental plane.
Wow. Yeah. I have a recollection of, this was a while ago when my mother transitioned. I was in my car and I was starting to just get really sad, and even my shoulders sagged down, and I was just going deep into letting the tears and the wailing come up. And all of a sudden, my shoulders lifted up and I was just relieved of that pain. And there was so much light coming in. And that was an experience. I thought it was maybe angelic, which it could have been, but this is what we're talking about. And it was beyond me. It was a healing of some form. So, and maybe it was my higher self, who knows, but this was the divine omniscience of a master or our higher self. Wow. Very, very cool. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, that's great. Thanks for that sharing that. You can really feel that.
Yeah. Well, we are excited for this. Every time we get together, it's such a beautiful experience, again, in the container that's held. We've talked about the dream space ahead of the gathering together online, how that could be affected, how we could begin to even feel the energies coming in and working on us before we even begin to meet as well. It is pretty amazing how that happens. So can we do a short mini transmission right here for everyone so they can get a taste?
Yeah, we'll do the Arcturian omniscience healing frequency. And I just wanted to reiterate what you said, or emphasize that maybe by the time people watch this, they'll already have a lot of these kind of omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent experiences. Sometimes we call them spiritual capacities or abilities or powers, like you referred to the Masters of the East, the books. A lot of those are like bilocating and so forth, because they're in resonance and their higher soul is already putting them there. They have those experiences, and then they watch the video, kind of like they had the healing in our Mastery Empowerment class before. And then they like show up. So like time is alinear. And then also just by like hearing about this, it's because we already have these capacities, then all of a sudden you're able to pay attention to those things that are actually happening at a subliminal level that we're referring to, just through kind of, oh, Yeah, I do. I do have these abilities now that you've mentioned it. It's sort of almost. Anyways, so that's kind of fun phenomenon, synchronicities. Yeah, so we're going to experience the Arcturian omniscience frequency. And of course, this is helping us to remember that quality in our divine self. But that can show up in various ways that people might pay attention to. People might start reporting that you're helping them in their dream space. They might just feel you more, feel your positive presence. Those are just examples. Okay, and people might have a very already know specifically how they want these frequencies or this connection with their higher self and guides, as well as the Arcturians to manifest for them. So you can just relax and receive, and we're starting with the Arcturian omniscience frequency. We're going into a second deepening cycle with the Arcturian omniscience healing frequency. And that completes the exposure to the Arcturian omniscience healing frequencies. People can return to their physical body now. You can snap your fingers when you want to come back.
Wow, thank you. That was palpable right from the beginning. Very, very expansive. I want to say we could feel the multidimensionality of us. Very expansive. And that was just a first few moments. I heard very clearly, we are ascended masters. I heard we already are ascended masters. We've done this before. We are just remembering. We are remembering our ascendedness. And then I heard, walk this way, talk this way. Isn't that an AC/DC song?
Oh, I love that. Yeah, the AC/DC.
It's the resonance. We could feel the resonance of this. And that's where this gets exciting. We're looking forward to this time together, and we invite everyone to join us. We thank you for being here. And we've heard from members in the group that joins us that this absolutely affects people in their house. It affects their animals, and it really changes our lives. That's the subtlety of it. and we can't be in our mind. Our mind is going to have a challenge understanding what we do with it. But when we go through the experience and feel it and receive it and download it, then we know that there's something going on here. We can feel it and we sense it. So it's magical. And Jean, we always give a bonus for people registering.
I think the high frequency healing, because it's kind of within the same information package, like of the level 12. And I think that would really complement, and maybe even if people got a chance to work with that a little bit before this one, they really kind of really like ride two waves, one wave, and then blast off from that other wave.
Beautiful. Okay, we will make that available with your purchase, and you can get started with that right away in an instant download. Thank you, Jean. This has been beautiful. Any final thoughts as we say goodbye?
Oh, I'll just share like that short experience I had, with these here. It just reminded me like how much, like really what these frequencies do help us access these, what I call most subtle states of our consciousness. Maybe we remember them in the dream or deep sleep state. Sometimes for people maybe who meditate or pray, when you get more into the silent state, or even when you're walking about and you have that gap between two thoughts, that state of consciousness is this very deep, subtle state. And so sometimes our thinking, we're like always thinking, sometimes we call that our chatter. It sort of overlays on top of that subtle state. So sometimes we can't access it all the time. But I think what this helps us to do, even just a reminder by hearing this conversation, is like, oh yeah, okay, I remember that subtle state. And then you get to access all these different qualities of omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence that we already have within us.
That we already have, and we get to feel it even more. Beautiful. Thank you so much for this. We're looking forward to it.
Oh yeah, thanks, Lauren. Thanks, everyone.